Stopping by.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. It's been a hot minute since we connected, but I always value the time because you always give me something interesting to think about and apply to my life or my business. So I just want to let you know how much I appreciate you, and I'm looking forward to our little chat today.
Absolutely, not a problem.
Yeah.
Looking forward to bringing the heat.
All right. So, you always have something interesting. I just want to leave it open, say, what do you want to chat about? I just love to hear what's some cool stuff you're up to right now.
Yeah, a lot of the focus is on the agency mainly because of the time of the year that we're in, and this is when we're also asked the most questions around what's working, what's not, because we're testing so aggressively, right?
Yes.
And considering the fact that the next couple months even leading into next year are some of the most important months for many of the businesses that we run ads for, it gives
Mhm.
us a lot of perspective on how things are going to look into next year, possibly even let's say midway through next year, just because of, you know, all the intel we get from our rep, both dedicated and the agency rep, and then all the stuff that we're testing while all this is going on. And
Right.
so it feels great to know like when a new placement's ready to go. Sometimes we get it a couple weeks in advance or a couple months in advance, and we get to try things out, especially during peak season, so to speak. But then at the same time, just knowing that the network isn't falling apart like a lot of people are saying it is. It still performs really well, and the principles of how you advertise are very much the same. It's
Yeah.
just there's a lot more to manage these days
Yeah.
versus let's say a couple years ago when I could set it and forget it.
Oh my goodness. I mean, I was actually saying this to somebody this morning. Like, despite all the headaches, it
Hmm.
it just still works better and faster than a lot of other platforms. Like, I
Yeah.
know you and I, we experiment, and we're definitely in other platforms too. But I keep coming back to. I don't know about you, but I keep coming back to Facebook. Like, it's still a staple because it just works.
Yeah, I mean, all of our clients are working with us because of it's for Facebook and Instagram. That's what I'm known for. Don't get me wrong; they ask me about TikTok and YouTube and some Twitter. Some of them are asking for LinkedIn.
Mhm.
It's never going to stop that I get asked about another network. But
Yes.
it's more of, can we at least dial in something? Can
Mhm.
we get Facebook to work again? Can we get Instagram to work again? And then that's always the question is again, because they typically have had the experience to where it works really well.
Mhm.
And maybe in the last couple months or maybe the last year, they've just been having these hiccups that they've never experienced before, so they feel defeated. And so, as long as I can give them reassurance that yes, we could still make this work, maybe it's not a 5-to-1 return, but 3-to-1 isn't so bad. Like, as
Right.
long as we could get something to perform where you're happy, then yeah, of course we can make this work.
Right.
But we will start to look at other networks for you if you'd like us to.
Yeah. I think that's always a smart thing to do.
Yeah.
And let's just get into a couple of like more advanced stuff. Like, I thought it was interesting how you take a look at what happens at the end of the year. We're getting into Black Friday to predict how things are going to happen in the next year.
Hmm.
So, like, what are some ways that you actually leverage it? Because a lot of times, right, when especially for e-com stores, we're running Black Friday sales. It's pretty finite, right? Like it
Yeah.
it ends, and then we got to turn the campaign off. So, what do you look for, and how do you leverage that for the next year?
Yeah. So, like, for example, a couple years back when Instagram stories were new, they were relatively new. Not many people were creating promotions just for Instagram stories, and that was one of the things that got the attention of Facebook at the time, and they turned it into a case study. Was how I used Instagram stories to generate over $1 million for a small Shopify store, just using stories, right?
Mhm.
So during that Black Friday promotion, it actually did so well that they ran that promotion all the way until January 1st. Like
Okay.
they didn't even stop the ads. They kept it going even though it said Black Friday, Cyber Monday on it,
Oh, really?
right?
And it was
Yeah,
fine.
still
Okay.
worked. Still
Mm,
worked. And so oftentimes I'm looking at, what are some new placements or new features that have been released during this time of the year, and lo and behold, Reels have been out for a couple months now, but people
mhm,
still don't try them in terms
right.
of ads because they're 30 seconds or less, and for some reason people have an issue with creating 30-second ads, but it used to be difficult to create a 15-second ad. I don't know,
Right.
strange. But even then, you've started to see the what is it, Facebook overlay for Reels, and or the Instagram overlay for Reels, which is formally like running ads on Instagram TV, or it's like a different version of InStream that they incorporated now for Reels. And those recently popped up. Like we're talking a couple weeks.
Mhm.
And when I notice these things in certain accounts, I immediately test it. I don't even wait. I just go ahead and create something the next day or a couple days later to start putting into the rotation, because
Mhm.
anytime something new comes out, they are giving preferential treatment to that placement. They are charging
Yes.
the least amount for it. They want you to try it. People who have great results from it, they're going to ask you, "Hey, can you share this with us and let us know what you think?" One of my clients is getting ad credits for running real ads. Like
What?
we're getting credits
Wow.
from Facebook for
Uh-huh.
testing. And so, I'm like, I didn't ask for it. I just remember getting an email saying, "Hey, we'd like to supply you with some ad credits to continue to run Reels."
Nice.
Sure. Right? So that's the type of thing that we were looking for, is like, how can we obviously use the entire ecosystem to generate results for the client, but then if they're giving us a chance to try new things and get results from it, it's like, sure, we'll create promotions just for that. Like if
Mhm.
we can get Reels to convert like they do with stories or like they do with the feed, we'll create an entirely, different campaign just for that. And we'll run it until it doesn't perform anymore. Right? So
You're using manual placement, like, for only that placement, or you're just
mhm.
replacing that creative in your auto placement campaigns?
Just that placement, just
Mhm.
that. It's just like how we
Interesting.
run individual story campaigns, but of course, when we run stories, we also do it for Facebook and Messenger stories, but
Mhm.
it's entirely just stories. And
Okay.
then if we're doing
Interesting.
reels, it's just reels.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And that is a good tip because at least for pro buyers, I know, like, I'm always paying attention to when I get little pop-ups that says, "Hey, you should try this or you should try that." Like, that's a huge clue that Facebook really wants you to use it. So you should just use it because they're just gonna favor you because they right? It's all this Pavlovian response they're trying to get out of us, right?
Yeah,
To get us
exactly.
to use things.
Exactly.
So,
And
you know
also the great thing is, like, you could start to see what part of the network are they giving like more traffic to as well. Like for
Mhm.
example, when I'm using Reels, I've tested it with conversion ads, I've tested it with traffic and engagement. And the weird thing is that I'm getting the best results with Reels using the traffic objective,
Oh, that's really
n-
interesting.
not conversion. And this is just from the last couple weeks of testing. And I started thinking, like, is this just warm traffic? Is it cold? Like I started looking at all the stats. I'm getting great results just running the traffic objective to Reels for cold and warm
Hmm.
simultaneously. And of
Yeah.
course, if you use Facebook's tracking, it's going to be all out of whack. And you're like, how do I know it's really working? Well, based upon what we're using for tracking, when we have Google Analytics, we'll use Hyros, and a couple other people are using Red Track. When we look at the back end statistics of what came in from those ads, a lot of the attribution is saying that the first click and sometimes even the first entry into the client's ecosystem is coming from those traffic campaigns. And
Mhm.
then they might buy because of something else, but the whole reason they got into that ecosystem was from those traffic campaigns.
Right.
And so we're able to see, like, they're obviously working, but if we were reliant on last click data only,
Mhm.
we would
Mhm.
never know that they were working in the first place.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so, something like that we would never have known a couple years ago when a lot of these traffic platforms didn't come out. And in terms of the tracking, we
Mhm.
wouldn't have known that that entry point was what led to them eventually buying something. We would have been like,
Mhm.
oh, it's not working, and we would have tried something else and just relied on the last click data
Yeah. Yeah. And that's very smart. You always give me something new that I can think to test because that's very smart to test. Because I think a lot of times we're just living in conversion objective land, right?
all day.
And that's very smart to test like the other objectives too. And super interesting to me that, it'd just be the click through. So
That's all it
that's
is.
really
Just
interesting.
sometimes you just need to get people in that ecosystem, right? And
Mhm.
I'm finding that with a lot of our e-commerce clients these days, it's like, yeah, we understand brand loyalty. Those are the people you want to get on a subscription box or some sort
Yep.
of recurring offer, because that's
Yeah.
the money, right? That's the
Yeah.
money maker. That's what keeps the lights on.
Right.
But what is going to get people to not just get into the ecosystem, but stay there and buy more stuff and not just get on a subscription? Maybe they buy something for a friend. Like, what else is there? You
Mhm.
can run conversion ads all day. We all want conversions. We get that. But
Mhm.
every now and again, you create a new ad from something using engagement or traffic. And if you have the right tracking in place, you could see that it's outperforming what you're seeing on the conversion side. and
Right.
you wouldn't know unless you try it. And I think a lot
That's
of
right.
people just get complacent, or they look at their stats and they go, "Oh, it's conversions, it's working. I'm getting a 2-to-1 return, 3-to-1 return." And then they just stop. It's like, "I'm just going to do this." They
Mhm.
forget what we all used to do when we first started running ads, which is we test everything.
Yes.
And so I always remind myself, like, hey, what's the fundamental of advertising? Test everything. And why
Mhm.
am I not doing that right now? And
Yeah.
so, budget pending, depending on who it is that I'm running the ads for, I oftentimes will test the other the other placements, the other objectives, just making sure that I'm not missing out on something simply because maybe I'm ignoring it.
Yeah. And, I talked to some newer media buyers, and sometimes they share with me that they know they need to test. They know they need to test sometimes what feels like a really out there solution, but they're afraid to because maybe they don't know how to approach the client. And also I'd be curious, like, how do you kind of think of the budget in terms of how much you're going to use, like on testing, like literally like wild stuff? Because
Mhm.
I think especially when you're starting out, you're really afraid of failure, right? And that they'll fire you the first time you make a misstep. So, like, what kind of
Yeah.
advice would you give?
Well, don't get me wrong, even with big budgets, you have those fears of, let's say you just use the 80-20 approach, right? And it's not even 80-20 of the budget. You sometimes are thinking, as an example, 80% goes towards cold traffic, 20% the retargeting.
Mhm,
And then you might have to go back and go, now I need the 80-20 of that budget, and I'm just going to use it for testing versus what I know is working, right?
mhm,
So it's even smaller than what you have initially come up with. And
mhm,
honestly, what I find is that with my clients, as long as I communicate before I start anything, what I'm going to do, how I'm going to do it, why I'm doing it, and the proposed number that I want to spend,
mhm,
they're usually fine with it. And by
mhm.
usually, the only thing that they come back to me with is, can we change the number? That's it. They have no problem testing it because they
Mhm.
understand the reasoning behind it
Right.
because of how I'm explaining it to them, right? Hey,
Mhm,
this is what I want to do. This is the reason why I'm testing it. This is what I've seen from my own experiment and other accounts, or from, outside sources, good friends of mine, other people who've tested it. They've told me I should give it a try, so on and so forth. Here's what I propose is the budget for that. Are you cool with it? Yes or no?
right.
That's it. And even if they say no, guess what? It's there. So now they could revisit it later. You could bring this same plan to someone else and not have
Mhm,
to retype it, literally just copy paste, boom. Hey, next client, are you cool with this? Yes or no, right? You just give yourself the opportunity to try it with somebody. And once you
yes.
have some stats back and some proof that this process works, guess what? It's a lot easier to promote to everyone else.
That's
Because once
right.
you say, "Oh, it works," no one's gonna say no. They're just gonna be like, "Yeah, just go ahead and do it. I don't care
Yeah.
how much you spend. Just
And
do
you
it."
don't need 50 people for it to work. I find I just share, "Hey, I tried this with this one other client. Here's what happened."
Yeah,
They're
if
pretty
it's
much
a
sold.
similar industry, similar funnel, similar offer type, and by that I mean, is it a digital product or is it a physical product, right? Just
Mhm.
something as simple as that, where it's like, "Hey, I tried this with a webinar funnel. It did great. You have a webinar. Do you wanna try it?"
Yes.
Most of the time, they're gonna say yes. And
Yeah.
so I just gotta get one person to give me a shot, and I usually go to the clients with the biggest budgets to try this first because then I have a much larger sample size.
Mhm.
So my
Yes.
80-20 with them might be something like, "Hey, you got $3,000 to test this one thing."
Mhm.
It's like, "Great. I didn't even need that much, but sure, I'd be happy to." And
Right.
then I can take all those stats and bring it to someone else.
Mhm.
And so, I'm making sure that I'm staying on top of the network, not just in terms of compliance, but then it's like, "Hey, this just came out. This is how it works. Here's how I set it up. It
Mhm.
takes 10 minutes to put together. We'll have results in a day." Like, just having that information makes it a lot easier to promote to my clients and have them
Right.
just say, "Yeah, go ahead. Do your thing."
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I think a big part of what we do too is the relationship with the clients. Yes, right? We gotta figure out the algorithm and all this other kind of stuff, but it's huge, like, how you communicate with your clients,
Mhm.
and I really respect how you do that 'cause, you're just very transparent and communicate frequently.
So let's expand on that, right? Because my main thing with clients is that I want to educate them as much as, let's say, someone who came to me just trying to learn ads for the first time, right?
Mhm.
So I treat every client like a student in a sense where, here's why I'm doing this, here's the results from it, here's what I'm going to change, here's what I'm going to set up. And, of course, I'm going to provide screenshots and a Loom video and as much information as I can so that if they were to want to do this themselves, they'd be like, you know what, I learned this from David from when he sent me that video or when he sent me that breakdown of how
Mhm.
he sets it up. Because
Mhm.
they would never assume that someone would put that much time and energy into giving them a how to when
Right.
I'm the one doing everything,
Yeah.
right? But
And
just
you're not
giving them
afraid that they're gonna fire you and do it all themselves,
no,
because right?
most of the time they won't. They
Yeah.
just won't. And that's the other thing is I'm not scared of being fired anymore. Like, I'm just not. I've been through it enough times to where
Mhm.
it's like, it's going to happen. And here's the
Mhm.
thing, I've been fired from accounts because
Mhm.
I made them so much money that they just hired someone in-house.
Yeah.
So in reality, I didn't get fired. They were just
Mhm.
like, "Hey man, thanks for everything. Our agreement's over." Right?
Right.
It's like the agreement is officially over, as in our 1-year review is up, and we're gonna decide to just go
They've
in-house.
evolved, like, it's you're right,
Yeah,
it's not firing, they just evolved, and that's I mean, that's a badge of honor, I think, to you because you've taken them to another level.
exactly. And you know what? They learned everything along the way. They saw how things were done. They have all the data that they need. They see the account structure, how the campaigns are put together.
Mhm.
Like, there's nothing wrong with them learning this stuff along the way because then they appreciate you more. And here's
Mhm.
the thing, you get a great testimonial out of it, you get a case study out of it, you get a nice little badge of honor that I worked for this XYZ company, right? You can use their logo on your stuff.
Mhm.
And then on top of that, guess what? They could always come back.
That's right.
So it's like, why not be a great communicator and educator during the process.
Mhm.
Because if they don't leave and they decide they want to keep working with you, these are the people that stay with you for years.
Yes.
And I have a history of keeping people for the low end is a year. I have one client that's been with me almost 10 years now. And I have
Wow.
other ones who've, bounced around and come back. And then I've also had some people who I've worked with on launches, for example, for 7 years. Right. So it's
Wow.
like, why not? Just
That's
give
right.
them what they need,
Mhm.
let them be happy, and they're always gonna remember you when the time comes that they wanna work with you again.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So how's your course coming along? I know I'm in your course
Mhm.
and, how's that coming along? Because there's so many changes happening with Facebook. I don't
Yes.
know how you can keep up with it.
Yeah, so, well, my team and I keep tabs on anytime there's a news announcement, anytime there's something done with compliance. Like, we actually read the compliance every week
Mhm.
just to see if there's changes.
Yeah.
There's nothing like a quick find and see if any of the language has changed or anything like that.
Yes.
But on top of that, Facebook's releasing a lot more news these days, or should I say Meta, right? They're changing
That's right.
things around and they're always releasing new updates as to what's going on. And
Mhm.
anytime that happens, we're keeping a log of it, right? So
Mhm.
it's like, oh, Zuck released this thing about the metaverse. Great. Keep a tab on it, get some reference pieces, put it in the project system, make sure everyone's aware, right?
Mhm.
So we're constantly keeping on track of things that way because the Facebook newsroom is a gold mine of information. It's like the minute a placement's released, there's an article about it. Anytime there's a compliance change, there's an article about it. It's just
Right.
all the time there's something.
Yeah. And do you
But
find that they
then
have hidden messages sort of in it? Because I remember
all the time,
somebody told
all the
me with Google, remember what was it, Matt? Like he used to go on YouTube all the time.
time.
So
Mhm,
one of my friends told me, he says you have to read in the silences,
mhm.
but about what Google doesn't say.
Yeah,
So like
that's what
how do you interpret what Facebook or Meta says?
Facebook just did that with a new feature for groups and subscriptions.
Mhm.
No, they released it so nonchalant that people didn't even know it came out. But they're basically saying that you can create your own subscription program on Facebook and keep all the revenue
Mhm.
and build your subscriber base and an email list. And they're just giving you the features to build a business inside the Facebook ecosystem. And no one's talking about it.
Right.
These were things that we were requesting obviously 3 to 5 years ago, but it's
Yeah.
like, hey, it's here now. And no one's talking about it because
Mhm.
everyone's talking about the crypto metaverse side of the business that's coming in the future. And that's great.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. You still got a business you got to manage right now.
Yeah.
So why not use the tools that they're giving you?
Yes.
And on top of that, you know, considering the course part, it's like, yeah, it's Facebook and Instagram ads. Of course, there's more integration of utilizing the different placements than before. Because before it was just, hey, the feeds work. We
Mhm.
know this. The feeds work. Use stories. You're good. But when you dig a little deeper, now it's like, how do you utilize stories to be more effective? Is it a single story? Is it a three-piece story where it's 15 seconds in three increments? And then all of a sudden that performs better? Or is it a great idea to use reels? Or do you use the Facebook feed in conjunction with the marketplace and Facebook shop? And there's more opportunity now than a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
a lot of the content that I had to put together back then, it's not that it has to be updated. A lot of it is still very relevant, but the part about how can you scale is the part that had to evolve.
Mm-hmm.
Because ever since iOS, you can't just, well, you can, but you don't want to create 100 campaigns at 25 bucks a day and, just let it ride and see what happens. Does
Yeah.
that still work to a degree? Yeah, not for everyone though. There used
Mm-hmm.
to be some cookie cutter processes that worked for everyone. And
Mm-hmm.
now every account has a different personality. And I've been saying that for years,
Yes.
where it's like one account does great with ad set budgets and the other one does great with CBO. You don't know why, but that's just the way it is. And then
Exactly.
you have another one where cost caps are phenomenal and another one where bid caps are phenomenal and you
Yeah.
just got to do that. And so these are all things that are far more prominent now since
Mm-hmm.
April
Mm-hmm.
of 2021 specifically, and I've had to put more emphasis on that and more content around that because no one's talking about it.
Yeah.
It's basically just ads work, yes or no. That's all
Yes.
people are putting out there.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I'm like, that's not how this works anymore, guys.
Yeah.
Like, understand the fundamentals. That's never going to change. But when you're talking about specifics, well, let's dig a little deeper and put some new information out there.
Yeah, yeah. There's so many nuances and also I think like understanding the impact of the different placements too, because
Mhm.
behave like just because it's vertical video doesn't mean you can do it the same because people behave differently in reels than they do in stories and
Yep.
all there's so much to think about.
And cross pollination of content, right? Because I'm
Yeah.
using so much TikTok content from my clients
Oh,
and repurposing it for reels so they
yeah.
don't have to overthink it. Like you're
Yeah.
not creating content just for reels. I'm like, just go create over there and
Yeah.
then give it to me. Like
Yes.
it's that's all you have to do. And if you want to leave the TikTok logo, I don't care. Like just
Mhm.
bring it to me and let me use it. And then that
Yes.
opens up the possibility for that client to build their personal brand or to showcase their product line and not have to worry about having to create 3, 4, 5 variations of the same piece of content. It's like, no,
Yeah.
just give me what you got and I'll figure out the rest.
Mhm.
And now we get to test a placement that you would have never tried if it wasn't for me saying something.
Right. And I mean, I wish more media buyers did that, like just make things easier for the client
Mhm.
because yeah, a lot of times it's just easy to do a TikTok video. That's great. And then we figure like you just figure out how to make it easy for them so
Yep.
you get what you need and and you're so now you're the solutions person.
Mhm. And that's the
Yeah.
thing. We're supposed to come into their environment and provide the solution to their problems. Like
Mhm.
that is essentially what the agency is there for, right? We make
Mhm.
their life easier, we reduce the stress, and what
Yes.
problems do you have? We're going to solve them. And
Yeah.
then my goal is that a month from now, when we're having our monthly meeting, quarterly meeting, whatever it is that we're going up to, you go, you know what? Everything's improved and it's a lot more seamless. And I'm glad that we hired you. Like that's
Mhm.
all you're looking for.
Right.
Oftentimes when I'm working with personal brands, I hear things like, "Oh, I was able to get my dream car, move to a house that I've wanted, uh, doing more things with my kids because I'm more free. We took a vacation for the first time in 3 years." Like I listen for those cues
Mhm.
because then that means I'm doing my job right.
Mhm.
I'm getting the results that they want and have dreamed of, and so they're enjoying themselves more. If I'm
Yeah.
working with a company, it's things like our bottom line has gotten better. We were able to hire more people. Our product
Right.
line's expanding. Like I
Yeah.
listen for these cues and I'm like, okay, I'm doing my job. I don't
Mhm.
need them to tell me that, oh, thanks for the extra 50% in revenue. Like that's great. I could see that myself. I don't need the extra validation. But
Mhm.
when I hear things like, everyone on the team got a bonus because we made more money this year. Well, I know I was a big part of that, so awesome, right?
Yes.
That's something that I can write down and be like, I helped this company increase their revenue, thus everyone on the team got a bonus.
Right.
Right? Those are things that I keep track of.
Yeah.
And from there, I know I'm doing my job. So yeah.
Yeah. So where do you find that you have to give the most help to people taking your course? Like what's is there like a kind of an area that you just find people are just not getting or they're having the most trouble with or making the most mistakes with?
Funny enough, the setup process is always the one that I get asked about the most. Even if you create a video that you're like, click this and click that, everyone's dashboard is still different. I don't know why the way I look at my accounts is different than other people.
Mhm.
In certain countries, I don't even know if a lot of people are aware of this. In certain countries, the dashboard is missing certain pieces. So when you log into Ads Manager, what I see is not always what they see.
Mhm.
Sometimes there's, the 7-day click, 1-day view conversion window stuff. Sometimes that's at the top, not the bottom, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes our targeting options are present in the middle of the screen. Other times it's at the way bottom. So when you talk about setup, and even something as small as like go to the middle field and then click in your detailed targeting, theirs could be at the bottom. And just because you said it's in the middle, their brain fries and they don't know where to look anymore. And it's like everything's broken, right?
Right.
And so you have to re explain it like, okay, look for the section that says detailed targeting. Scroll, scroll, scroll. Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's like everything's working again. So
Yes.
campaign setup is oftentimes the most asked about because then people get into their head about, do I create a campaign for each interest? Do I create a campaign to where it's all the interests and then every interest has one ad? Or do I do one campaign, bundle everything together and throw everything in at the same time? That comes up all the time. All those questions around what's the perfect setup? There is none.
Yes.
It's
That's right.
based upon your budget. The
Mhm.
bigger the budget, the more you could play with, right?
Mhm.
And by play with, I mean you can have a campaign with one interest and one ad. And guess what? If you have 3 variations of copy, that means every copy variation can have its own campaign. And if you have more creative, every single campaign can have its own creative, which means that one interest could have 9 or 12 variations before you go to another interest.
Mhm.
And if you have 10 interests, now you got 120 variations, right? It can go on and on. And yes, there are accounts I manage where it's that level of like
Wow.
how many setups can you go?
Right.
And
Yeah.
the budget's there. The
Uh-huh.
budget is available to test every single detail.
Mhm.
And you wonder how some accounts are spending 10, 15K a day. That's how.
Yeah.
Because the moment you cut off all those underperformers,
Mhm.
imagine spending 5K a day and it's returning 15,000 a day just like that. And you don't have to think because you
Yeah.
just done all the work.
Mhm.
But you know how long it takes to set that up? It takes hours, and that's one account. So
Mhm.
imagine when you're doing this for multiple accounts that spend 100,000 plus a month. The ones that spend multiple hundred thousands a month are the ones where you're testing everything from bid caps to cost caps to different variables of the bids that you're putting into each of those campaigns. And some are auto, and the ones that are auto are segmented by creative, and it goes on and on and on. And
Yes.
these are
Yeah.
multiple accounts.
Yes.
So that, to bring it all back around, everything I just said is a campaign setup. It's asked about constantly. But if
Wow.
I said to someone, "Here's how you scale a campaign," you just need to do what I would consider to be, the 4 by 4 method, 4 interests, 4 ads, make them your 4 best ads. Every campaign, you could change up the audiences to where maybe it's all for the same audiences. Maybe it's individually different audiences. Like you just do 4 by 4 and just set the budgets of 300 a day and that's it.
Mhm.
If I
Yeah.
say that to someone, they'll go, "Oh, I'll run with that." And they'll never ask me again about how to scale an account because that's the only thing they will use.
Yes.
But there's
Yeah.
so many ways to scale an account.
Mhm. Yeah, and
Campaign
I think
Yeah,
it's like people are afraid again, I think they're afraid of making a mistake,
yeah,
right? And I'm just like, just put it out there, right? It's just put it out there. This is the internet. It's not written in stone. Just put it out there.
there's no one size fits all.
Yes.
And the main thing is that it's just knowing there's a lot of possibility.
Mhm.
That's the great part, right? And then one day when you have the chance, you pick one and you see how it works for your account. So if
Yes.
I go to you in my course and I say, "Hey, did you know there's 20 different ways you could scale a campaign?" Of course, their brain's gonna explode. They're gonna go, "How? I only know 2 ways."
Mhm.
I show them what those ways are, and then all they have to do is go, "I like that one and I like that one." And then they just run with that. And if
Mhm.
they get great results from A versus B, cut off B. How about you go try the other one? Okay, cool. I'm gonna go try this one, and I'm gonna compete with A. And let's say
Mhm.
this time, variation D does better. Great, cut off A. Go try another one, and you just keep doing this until you find the
Yes.
ones that work for you.
Yes.
and then you
Yeah.
run with those. And
Yeah.
the only reason I'm able to say I know, let's just say a dozen or so ways of scaling an account is because I have a lot of opportunity to try things. So
Mhm.
I'm giving this opportunity to someone else to have a choice. They have choices. And I think that, most courses don't outline what those choices are. They just go, "This worked for me, go do it." And then that's it.
Yes, that's right, yes. No, and, yeah, we're basically getting the benefit of you doing all this testing, so we don't have to,
Yeah.
and then you saying, "Here's all the things you can test." Because I know a couple times I feel like I've exhausted everything. Because sometimes it just takes a while, like, you literally have to just keep testing everything,
Mhm.
and I
Mhm.
know I've exhausted stuff, and I come to you, I'm like, first of all, I then get imposter syndrome, maybe I'm doing something wrong, and you always say, "No, no, no, it actually looks fine." And then you give me something new to test, and that's usually, and sometimes it's just like a little change, right? They just test one other thing, and then it just starts to open up,
Yeah,
just
something
other
very
things.
subtle. It
Yeah.
can open up a delivery more where, like, your CPMs drop by half,
Mhm.
or something to where your click-through rate is higher,
Mhm.
right? Or, you know, for example, one of my clients recently was like, "All of our ads have no social proof." This was before they started with me, right? So this is a
Okay.
recent client. "All of our ads have very little social proof. I feel like that hurts our results." But their
Mhm.
results were pretty good. So
Mhm.
somebody was chirping and told them that you need more engagement on your content to get better results,
Mhm.
because they weren't saying, "Let's try this." They were insinuating that we have to do it.
Right.
So automatically, I'm like, "Oh, they went through some course or something, or a YouTube video. This person didn't say that this worked for me and it's one way of doing it. They basically said this is the way to do it,
Mhm.
and now my client thinks that's the gospel and we have to do it this way.
Yes.
Now let
Yeah.
me prove to them whether or not they actually need it." So I'll do a A/B test, my way versus this way. And, hey, here's your engagement. We'll throw an engagement campaign, we'll throw in your post IDs, we'll inflate it a little bit, and then we'll run it against the ones that are brand new, which are the ones that I create. We'll just run them from scratch with zero engagement, and we'll see
Mhm.
which ones perform. The ones with
Mhm.
conversion from day one versus the ones with engagement plus conversion after a couple days, and just see what happens. And
Mhm.
guess what? In some accounts, engagement plus conversion works better. In other accounts, it does zero. It does
Yes.
nothing. And
Yeah.
this was one of those cases where it did nothing. And then when
Mhm.
they told me where they learned it from someone who's great at e-commerce. They are
Oh,
not an e-commerce person. They are a
right.
digital marketer, where these people are reading their content, fully reading the content. And
Mhm.
those who actually engage with it are hyper qualified clients,
Mhm.
because the minute they apply and all this other stuff, it's like 70% of those people close.
Right.
So why do we need a ton of engagement if you're very specifically trying to find that one person who's going to give you all this money to work with you? Whereas
Mhm.
in e-commerce, more social proof means more people trust this vendor, which means more sales.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm like,
And I
that's
think it's,
not the
you
same.
bring up a good point there about, like, just being open
Mhm.
to testing. And first of all, what I have seen too is huge mistakes when I take over a new account, and then I hear the complaint, because I always ask, like, why do you need somebody new? And usually what happened was the person came in new, they paused everything and just did it the one way they were taught. Because like you said, they're like, this is the gospel. This is the only
Yeah.
way I'm ever going to do ads. And of course it doesn't work. And then, it just kind of goes from there.
Yep.
But I also like that, we need to be open. And that's why, first of all, like, I always talk to other media buyers. I love having relationships with other media buyers, because I, like you, I don't think there's one way, and I always learn something new from somebody else. And I'm not proud. I'll test it. I just want it to
Yeah.
work,
Yeah.
right? You
And
know?
that's the thing. I took over an account 3 weeks ago where the media buyer previously, I should say media buyers on this account, were just running nonstop tests, nonstop. And the
Mhm.
problem with that is they didn't actually take anything that was working and scaled it. They just kept testing more.
Mhm.
And because of this, the return on ad spend was very low, very, very low. This business only needs a 1.4 to be profitable,
Mhm.
and they can just go from there. So if I came back and said, "Oh, I got you a 1.8," they would be ecstatic. Like, they would be fine. But I'm looking at the account and I'm like, "You're averaging a 1.2, and you have ads with a 4 and another one with a 3 and this one with a 5. Like, what's going on here? Like, why aren't you scaling this?" Of course, the
Yes.
the the CMO and the CEO were just like, it's not our thing. I understand, but it's also common sense when you look at numbers, right?
Mhm.
So of course it's they let the agency have free reign. The agency did what they know what to do, which is scale a lot and just keep doing it, and hopefully all of our tests work.
Mhm.
And they did okay, but they did not do what they intended to do, which is to scale this company.
Right.
In 3 weeks, all I've done, and they know this, is I've turned off ads that were underperforming and turned on retargeting. That's all I did.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
it. Within 3 weeks, they went from a 1.2 in that 3-week span to a 3.1, and that's all I did was retargeting and turn off underperformers.
Yeah.
And then because I saw ads that were turned off that should have been on, their budget naturally went up anyway.
Mhm.
So their revenue increased, their profit margin increased, their account is spending, it went from like 500 a day to now it's about 1200 a day, right? And this was in 3 weeks. So they are just blown away. They're like, "How is this possible? What are you doing?" And when I told them all I'm doing is switching things off and on, I haven't even launched what I want to launch yet.
Mhm.
I'm just retooling their account. One, they
Yeah.
felt embarrassed, but then two, they were also just blown away that something as subtle as just like switch this off, switch this on would
Yes.
change the whole dynamic of their account. And
Mhm.
that's all I've been doing for the last 3 weeks.
Mhm.
There are other accounts where I can only do that for maybe a couple days,
Mhm.
but they've run so many different things in this account for the last year that I was like, I don't even have to run new ads for like 2 or 3 months. There's
Right.
tons of stuff in here that's usable.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to convey to your client that sometimes they already had the answer. They just didn't see it.
Mhm.
It was there.
Yeah.
And the last person couldn't identify the winner.
It's like too much busy work, right? Like
Yes.
that's what Brian Tracy kind of talks about. Like you're pushing paper and like you feel like you're getting something done, but you're not. It's just a
Mhm.
waste of yeah.
And how many people look back through their stats 2, 3 weeks after the previous month is over?
Mhm.
Did everyone forget that there's a thing called retroactive purchases? That there's this thing where if you look at first and last click data, it's drastically different
Mhm.
when you can tell that the last click might have a better return on spend, which actually means that your retargeting efforts need to do better
Yep.
because that means it takes 3, 4, 5 times before someone makes a final purchase. But it might have been that a different ad led to that purchase or led them getting into the ecosystem, I should say,
Yes. Yeah.
before making that purchase. So these are all things that most people don't recognize. They just
Mhm.
look at how much did I spend? How much did I make? Great. I'm totally understanding of that. But
Mhm.
when I went through this account and I'm like, this ad that actually gets a 1.2 is actually the main reason why all these buyers come into this ecosystem and then become a subscriber. I'm like, why aren't we scaling that ad? At least
Yes.
we're breaking even, but getting subscribers a month later. Why aren't
Mhm.
we running more of this?
Mhm.
Why is the 3.0 ad turned off? Oh, because
Mhm.
they didn't look at the first and last click data of
Mhm.
this ad and
Mhm.
notice that on the last click side, it generates 3 times the return, whereas on first click, it generates 1.7. Like, you have to understand data, and that's what I was explaining to someone the other day was advertising now is as much about, yeah, we're pushing buttons. It's a great living. It's fantastic. But we're also reading reports constantly, and we have to be able to dissect the data as a scientist. We're basically data scientists, and we are manipulating these results to create a better result. And so
Mhm.
if you don't know how to read charts and specific stats and timelines of when something went live versus where it's at now and how did that change the revenue model, then you're going to lose clients.
Yeah. Yeah.
This isn't like 4 years ago where I could turn something on and not check it for a week and all of a sudden everything's a 4.0 and I look like a superstar.
Yeah.
I miss those days because that was back when you could have 50, 60 clients and like 40 of them were on autopilot.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Now, good luck with that. Now you
Mhm.
need a real team to manage multiple accounts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even with software, it's like it only goes so far.
It's more of an artwork like, it's more of an art now, I find, like,
Yeah,
it's an art form now.
yeah,
Yes. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And that's why now it's tougher to deploy things a lot quicker. Even
Mhm.
with a team, it's like it takes more time to get creative done. It
Yeah.
takes more time to build campaigns. Because I remember when Power Editor was out, and you were able to,
Yeah,
like,
I remember
you were
that.
you were able
The
to
good old
duplicate,
days.
you could duplicate 60 campaigns at once, and it was
Yes.
effortless, and then you'd, like, make a change, and it would do it to all of them, and, you deploy, like, 5 weeks worth of stuff in, like, 20 minutes. Can you do that now? Yeah, but after you create the first template. Once you have the first template, the rest gets easy. Now you can deploy campaigns in a couple minutes,
Yeah.
but that first campaign you set up, that could take 20 minutes, and
Mhm.
then you gotta create another version of that and another
Yeah.
version of that. And, when the expanded box was automatically turned on, and you couldn't just select all to turn them off, and you had to go one ad set at a time, like, that
Yes.
stuff takes forever.
Yes. Yeah.
So, campaigns that used to take 30 minutes for an account now take an hour and a half.
Mhm.
And that's why it's becoming more of a science to do
Mhm.
this stuff. Which
Yeah.
one's expanded versus not? Now that they're taking away the expanded option, it's like, how does your account perform with this new hybrid model versus just using lookalikes?
Right.
One ad set, one image, one piece of copy versus dynamic ads.
Mhm.
When to use dynamic versus not, right? These are all things that we didn't have to think about a couple years ago.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
if you
there's
can.
so much, yeah, and that again, that's why I so appreciate the community, like, being in a supportive community like the one that you've created because, you just you share so much what's happening, right? Because like you said, you have a lot of opportunity, I have opportunities, other people have different opportunities, and, when we can share it and I like how you just kind of also share your approach to it, then it just kinda makes us all better because, like you
Mhm.
said, no one person can keep up with all of this.
Yeah, and also, considering that I'm refreshing the course, and before the beginning of the new year,
Mhm.
everyone will have the opportunity. Well, everyone who bought last year automatically gets the default of everyone gets the refresh.
Okay.
But if they had not bought, they get the opportunity to join at a membership level now. And the reason
Okay.
for that is because I'm changing stuff all
Mhm.
the time, right?
Mm.
And it's so hard now to create a one-off course and just walk
Mhm.
away. Why?
Yeah.
Because the platform is changing every week.
Mhm.
So it becomes like a second job to just keep things up to date, let people know what's working, what's not. And quite honestly, it's like, in order for me to make sure that I'm providing the best experience I can, I have to make sure that as more people join, that I'm also testing more things. And
Right.
so it gives me this opportunity to relay what's working, what's not, how I did things, especially when I know there's a community supporting me in doing just that.
Mhm.
How many courses have we bought in the past that were one-offs, where after a year, if the whole platform changes, that person just disappears?
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
it's so much work to redo 40 videos,
Sure. And then
right?
by the time you get it out, they've changed something else, right? And then you
Exactly.
got it, yeah.
So you
That's
have to
definitely happening
support
to me with Facebook, yeah.
you have to support the creator, because how else are they gonna be motivated to just re-record the whole thing if
Right.
it's like, "All right, we're on 3.0 now, and,
Mhm.
I have to redo everything for these 300 people that
Mhm.
paid 3 years ago," right? And that's
Mhm.
why you notice a lot of, courses these days are actually memberships, right?
Mhm.
You'll notice that now. And but the great part about it is now you're getting more stuff that's up to date.
That's
I
true.
actually think now, from a creator standpoint, not just from my clients, but in general, people who are creators who are willing to keep things up to date are going to benefit the most,
Mm.
especially when it's platform specific, or if it's like even just learning how to do content marketing. Let's say you're putting a course together on, like, how to create content that gets seen on TikTok, as an example. Like,
Right.
if you are constantly talking about the new features that's happening and going on at TikTok, and you can stay up to date with that, like, week by week, people would happily pay monthly for that, especially
Yes.
if they're using the platform. And I
Yes.
think it's the same thing whether it's Facebook or Instagram or, Google AdWords.
Mhm.
I think people are going to pay for that, because as long as they're using it as a business or even to grow their own business, it's like, why wouldn't you want the most up to date stuff that's been tested, so
Right.
then you know how to use it for yourself?
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
how can we find out about so is it a membership right now or like so is there any benefit in like kind of getting it now versus before you turn into membership?
No, it's already locked down, so, like, you can't even get
Okay.
in until next month. So
So it's totally closed.
it's
Okay.
totally closed. So it'll be called Convert University. It's getting a refresh, and there will be information in there on everything that's going on in the Facebook world now,
Mhm.
everything
Mhm.
going on with Instagram now.
Mhm.
All the compliance stuff's updated. Gonna start throwing in different templates that I've been using for
Mhm.
campaign structures and
Right.
content and everything, everything.
Right.
I
Yeah.
will say that a lot of the stuff that was in 1.0 still works in 2.0. So you won't be getting everything brand new, but let's just say half of the stuff had to be updated because of
Yeah.
iOS, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of that had to be put in place, but at least we know that the fundamentals still work. That was the one thing I was very proud of. Was like, wow, all my structures are still the same. Like how I build things is still the same,
I
and it
still
works.
use your naming convention.
It works,
Exactly, I
right?
still use it, yes.
It still works, and then, like, my $1 a day strategy versus my $5 a day strategy, like, that stuff still works,
Mhm.
and I'm proud that I was able to continue to use those, but then things like how to scale campaigns, there's so many ways to do it now, and I
Yeah.
had to update those because there's ways to do it for webinars versus low ticket, uh, items that you're trying to sell, both physical and digital, how to do it with high ticket services or high ticket product. Like I wanted to make sure I provided all the different possibilities.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that'll be out, end of the year into the beginning of the new year,
Mhm.
and it's not going to be as expensive ever as everyone thinks it is. So it'll
Okay.
be affordable for everyone.
Wow, that's amazing. And, I just love, I've just so appreciated, like, watching you and being part of your journey, seeing how you evolve and what you're doing and you're moving and having a family and all this stuff. So, can you tease us or what can you tell us about what we can expect from David Schloss 2022?
So, funny enough, context on that, for anyone who's in the business world, I find that the more you share about your life and not just your business, the more business you get in return. And so I've put up things about the move and how much I hate hurricanes. And yeah, actually, that actually led to getting a client, which is the crazy.
No, really?
Yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
for anyone who's curious, like I put up a piece of content about how my son was experiencing hurricanes for the first time, and when we moved away from Florida, I thought I'd never see a hurricane again, and then lo and behold, I moved back to the East Coast, this time the Northeast, and I get hit with a hurricane within a couple months of living here. So
Mhm.
it was a nice little touche from the universe of like, guess what? Here's another hurricane for you. And
Mhm.
by being just humorous and putting out like I thought I moved on from this, but I guess not. And here's what I learned about it. Someone
Mhm.
hit me up because they remembered that I run ads and they're like, I've always loved your stuff and I'd like to engage in a conversation.
Mhm.
All because my content popped up in their feed.
Mhm.
Had nothing to do with ads.
Yeah.
And so I'm vulnerable. I open up about what's going on in my life and what's going on in my business and times I've considered quitting and how things are doing now. Just doing all that and doing it in a story fashion because I tell stories
Mhm.
has led to more people follow the journey, but and also it's established trust and responsibility with the community. And then people know I'm not trying to BS them and sell them all the time. Like
Right.
even when I sold my course last year, it was very indirect. I wasn't telling anyone go here and buy now. It
Yes.
was more of just I have this thing,
Mhm.
and if you want it, here you go.
Yes.
And a lot of people said, "Okay, thank you so much."
Well, only
But
because 'cause
I
we've been waiting, like, 5 years for it. I think
right,
we've been asking you
and
all the time. Yeah.
that's the other thing is I put in this is year 14 of me running ads.
Yeah.
And so and yes, the ad platform's been around that long. And so for someone like me who waited and waited and waited on doing a course, it was mainly because I always felt like there was something else that I can add. And
Mhm.
sometimes you get trapped in that loop of what else can I put in there? What else can I
Mhm.
put in there? And then
Mhm.
you realize like 3 4 years has gone by because the platform will always evolve. And so I just had to sit down and I'm like, all right, let's do it now. Now is the time. Thank you 2020 for forcing me to do things. And I just said, "You know what? Let's just put it out and see what happens. And I'll finish the rest later if people are interested." And then when everyone was interested, I was like, "I think I need to finish this now." And
Mhm.
so, I think it was the right place, the right time. Um, if I did this years prior, I don't think it would have came out the same. I don't think I would have been as interested either. So I
Right.
think that it actually worked perfectly, even though it
Mhm.
took so long. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't force things like this, right? It's just it has to just to feel the right timing.
Yeah, and
So
I wanna do it long term, and so
right.
that's why I wanna build something that's affordable, but also is up to date, And as
Mhm.
long as the community supports that effort, I will keep putting effort into it. And
Okay.
like I said, if every course you buy is a one-off, you could pretty much look at how that creator evolves over time with the course. Are they
Yeah.
even interested in supporting it anymore? Did the group
Mhm.
go stale? Did the community
Mhm.
stop talking?
Mhm.
Because they already gave everything they could and they don't feel like their time and energy is worth it anymore.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
why I'm putting something together that's a little more, I'll just be honest, it's evergreen, right? It's gonna constantly be updated. So, you know what? If you want the most up-to-date stuff, I need people to support it. And I
Yes.
think as long as creators are honest about that up front, people will respect it.
Yeah. So you've got the course that you're updating. Anything else we can expect from David Schloss 2022?
Yes. So there will be a lot more YouTube content put out there. So now I'm going to be more of a creator versus just doing all the time. I think I've done enough doing of of ads and stuff for other people that I think it's time to put out some information for others.
Uh-huh.
But also, there are other things that I do outside of just running ads for people. I think that's what everyone knows me for. Is like, hey, that's the guy that does Facebook stuff and Instagram. Like, I get it. I've built that reputation, but there's a lot more that I do day to day. Like I'm constantly reading everything in finance and investing because that was actually my first passion. And outside of that, I'm a gamer. I'm on Xbox. I watch basketball. Like I don't just do one thing. And
Mhm.
so I always find ways to connect my hobbies or my passions with ads. And oftentimes my best content that I've written commingles these things. And I talk about how I learned something in investing actually worked for me in advertising, right? So being able to mix and match that and be able to show people like, hey, what I learned over here also relates to the advertising world.
Mhm.
That is something that I'll be putting out a lot more of because it keeps me one up to date with what's going on in the world, but two, it's more interesting to me when I can
Right.
combine these worlds together
Yeah.
because there's only so much I could say about the metaverse. Well, the metaverse that I'm aware of,
Yes.
and advertising, because that's not where I start my day.
Sure.
I don't wake up and go, let's learn some Facebook stuff today. There's actually some other things that I do first that actually get me more amped and excited to go about my day. It just so happens ads are what I do.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
gonna be putting out a lot more next year
Okay.
around all these things that I incorporate into my life, and that way people will see like how it all fits and how I've been able to evolve the business and things personally and from a business standpoint financially and how I don't have to work as hard as I used to, and so it's team building, like all these different elements outside of just here's how you set up an ad.
Right. Like you really are kind of letting us see behind the curtain.
Yeah, if you wanna look at it this way, it's more of like being the architect of your life, right? So people say it's
Mm.
like be the director of your own movie. It's like
Yes.
what I'm really doing is I'm building foundation blocks in different places.
Mhm.
And I just so happen to have built this house, this agency house, and
Mhm.
now I'm building these other houses. It's my monopoly pieces, right? So
Mhm.
now I'm getting my other pieces in place, and what people don't see is the other foundations that I've created because I don't
Mm.
talk about it. And
Yes.
so now I'm going to start talking about it. It just so happens that if people want to learn the agency side, it's like I've built this whole community for that. Like, let's talk about it over here. But if you want to learn about the other stuff that I'm doing, that if God forbid Zuckerberg decides to close this business down, I got some other things I could show you that I'm working on. And
Right.
then we'll see how we can bring that conversation to light another way.
Yeah.
Right. So there's going to be a lot more of me talking about other things other than ads. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
Well, I'm really looking forward to that. And yeah, I would encourage anybody watching this, whatever time you're watching or listening to this, go check out David at convertroi.com. You've been super generous with your time and your knowledge and your wisdom, David, as always. And I just really wanted to thank you for stopping by today.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.